So I did some videos last week on trading tennis on Betfair, and specifically at the Australian Open, and I talked about the Grand Slam tournament and how you get uncompetitive matches in the early rounds and how you can trade them, and we had a perfect example of this yesterday, and that's what I'm going to talk about in this video. Please like and comment on the video below. That will allow me to produce better quality videos and more of them in the future. If you're interested in learning to trade successfully on sports, then why not visit the BetAngel Academy, where we have more detailed videos. So as I've mentioned before, you get this pyramid structure with the two top seeds aiming to meet in the final at a Grand Slam, and therefore you get some really weird matches in the early rounds where players are going off at very, very short odds. And yesterday we had Dimitrov and McDonald. You probably know the former name but not the latter, and it was a very unbalanced, uncompetitive match. So Dimitrov was priced at 103, 104, and of course that determines that he should win that match very easily most of the time, and typically he does. And in fact, if you look over tennis matches over a long period of time, you tend to find that that is pretty much the case. The market's pretty efficient, and somebody going off odds of 2 will win 50% of the time, and so on. But when you're trading, you're not that concerned with that. You're not seeking value. Now, there are trades that you can do that exploit the creation of value from a betting perspective and turn it into more money via trading, but typically that's not what you're doing on trading. You're just looking for a window of opportunity and a relatively sensible risk to produce a good payoff. And that's pretty much what we had on the Dimitrov match. Now, the setup for the match itself was that I'm not sure if these two have ever played before, but the typical setup that I'm looking for is matches where players haven't played before and you get seeds at opposing ends of the scale. And Dimitrov was seeded third and McDonald wasn't seeded at all. Now, if you're a player coming into a tournament and you're relatively new on the scene and you haven't played some of these players, they have no idea how you're going to play, so that creates an opportunity for you. Now obviously the player on the other side is pretty skilled, but nonetheless you may be able to stand a chance if you just get a couple of lucky shots in, get a couple of easy points with a little bit of luck, and then suddenly you've got the potential to break serve. Now over a very, very long period of time, what you tend to find is that the more the match wears on, then even if the skill gap is only 1 or 2% between players, that tends to play out very much on the favour of the more skilled player. I've done some research and analysis on that. If you're interested in that sort of stuff, comment below and I'll post it up. But the longer a match goes on, and even with a tiny skill gap, because there are so many points played within a tennis match, that tends to bear true. So that's why the market's efficient in terms of pricing, and why you get those extreme odds, simply because typically that is the correct price that they should be. They will win the match very frequently. And at 103, Dimitrov was pretty much guaranteed to win that match. You got a sort of 97% chance of winning that match. And indeed, he did. So where was the opportunity from trading? Well, McDonald took the opportunity to put a lot of pressure on Dimitrov in the first set, which is typically what an outsider will do. That's their only chance. They may run out of steam by the second set, or be outgunned or outplayed or outthought by the more experienced player. So he went for it in the first set, and he got that break, and then he was able to take that first set. So if you look at the odds of Dimitrov, they started at 103, and then the price started to head out from there. And then Dimitrov got himself together, and he managed to win the next set. So the odds came back in again. And then, and this is the surprising bit, McDonald went on and got another set, so the price went all the way back out again. So at that point, with Dimitrov 1-2 and going into the fourth set, he's got to win that fourth set to stay in the tournament. And being third seed, he's got a fair chance this year of getting into the latter stages, winning a lot of money, and perhaps getting his first Grand Slam. So he had to win that fourth set, and that's exactly what he did. And then we go into the final set, and it was pretty close all the way through that final set, and you can see the odds wiggling up and down as the chance of a tie break goes to one side, of a break of serve goes to one side and then to the other. So you can see it swinging backwards and forwards, and then Dimitrov finally goes on to win the match. But at odds of 103, you're looking at laying Dimitrov with £1,000 for a liability of only £30. And if you look at the price at which he drifted out to, you can see that there was significant amounts of movement. So if my memory serves me correctly, I think McDonald never traded below odds on. I think he went down to about 2.1, was probably the lowest that he traded at when he was in the ascendancy. Again, that's a reflection of the experience and skill of Dimitrov. But as a consequence, you can flip that around the other side, and you can say that Dimitrov almost reached odds of 2 himself. So have a liability of £30 with £1,000, and you could have traded out nearly at odds of 2. So you would have gained the best part of £1,000 on that particular trade. So that's where you can look at it from a trading perspective, because you're saying, you know, if I make 500 on this trade and my risk is 30, or maybe probably an easier way to paraphrase this is, if I made £300 was my exit point on this trade, and I've got a risk of 30, more than 1 in 10 times I need to be able to find this trade. So in a match at 103, when you've watched the first couple of games, do you think you will be able to find the player that is unlikely to close out his first set? I think if you watch the match, or you do a little bit of research and you carefully pick and choose your targets, I think that's perfectly possible. Now, even if you can't do that, and the maths is perfect, then you're going to break even at worst anyway. But that's just, in a nutshell, really sums up exactly what you're attempting to do. If you use something, a tool like Tennis Trader, what you can do is you can frame that opportunity. You can say, well, if he's a breakdown here, if he's a breakdown there, if it looks like he's going to be broken here, and there are your natural exit points. So you would lay at 103, you'd say, here are the exit points that I'm looking for, and then the amount of profit that you can gain against that potential initial liability, assuming you're not going to trade out, you may want to trade out for a smaller loss, is what presents the opportunity. So if the payoff is 10 to 1, then you're saying, can I find these opportunities more than 10 times to be able to make a profit over a series of a number of matches or over this particular tournament? But this was a good example of it, because you saw the move from very, very low odds and much further out. But what you'll notice is that when you're looking at tennis, the odds may be efficient, but you're not interested in that from a trading perspective. You're interested in the path that they take on their way to completion. So Dimitrov went from 103 to 101, but he just happened to go all the way out to 1.9, and then he came all the way back in again, and then all the way out again, and then all the way back in. And then in that last set, where it was really tight, you can see the odds flying around all over the place. And those little gaps there and those big moves are where the opportunity presents itself. Because, you know, if you draw a line from 103 to 101, you're talking about 3 ticks, you're not talking about much profit. But when you're trading, you're not looking at that really. You're looking at how volatile each one of those individual matches is, and all of the paths that could follow between that point here and the end point within the match itself. And that's why we designed Tennis Trader, because you can use things like the game matrix and the set matrix to actually plot a path through an individual game to tell you what the price is going to be at one particular point, and that therefore gives you natural entry and exit points. But it also summarizes up the trade pretty well. You know, do you trade out on Dimitrov after he's broken, or do you wait until the end of the set and then trade out there, because your payoff will be absolutely massive, but of course that's going to occur much less frequently. So you have to make a decision when you're trading in any sport, but particularly in tennis, is, are you going to trade from break to break? Are you going to trade from game to game? Are you going to trade from set to set? And you know, you can work out exactly what strategy is there. Those are some of the decisions that you'll make when you go into a trade. The worst thing that you can do is go into a trade and not make any decisions at all, or know where your natural entry and exit points are, because then you'll never spot it. Or when you're in a trade, emotion takes over and you'll end up running it too long or not cutting it when you should do appropriately. But essentially, it's a good example of a slightly rarer trade, but one that has a definable payoff and with very, very low risk, because you're saying, put £1,000 into the market. My maximum risk is I'm going to lose 30 quid. I may actually even lose less than that. And here's my potential payoff. And the payoff occurs because of the following results. And I guarantee you, over the course of the tournament, you're going to have, and in fact there were more overnight, you're going to have more situations where a player starts at low odds and doesn't go on to win, or at least follows a meandering path to the win. And essentially that is where the opportunity lays within tennis, is not necessarily whether the odds are efficient at the start, but basically the path that they take to eventually win that match. And sometimes, as Dimitrov proved yesterday, even at short odds, that path can be hugely meandering.